their state. But once again, it's going to come down to is what the negotiation is with the feds that they're going to require for documents that you have to provide to make a real ID happen. So those will be some of the things that will be kind of coming up in that area. The big thing that we have to keep in mind is that when we're dealing with the real ID issue, these are also the same documents that will get you into the federal buildings that we have around. The only federal building right now that you don't need a real ID compliant ID is the courthouses. But if you're going to the Social Security offices, you're going to have to produce that. If you're going to the VA, it's another one that it's necessary. And that's been a little bit more interesting because there's some issues because some of the homeless vets that the VA takes care of don't have those documents. So there's been a little flexibility given in that area just because of the population we're working with that. A lot of the folks in that population just don't have the access or ability to produce the documents to get the real ID.
So can you use your passport to get into those?
You can use your passport is acceptable.
Is to get into like
Yes.
federal buildings?
Yes.
Okay.
So, and that was the last of the information I received, that's confirmation earlier this week, which was yesterday. So I keep on forgetting which day of the week sometimes. Other questions on real ID?
Is this a replacement for the driver's license or a separate?
This would be it's not to replace the current driver's license if you want to keep on using the current driver's license. It is a replacement though if you want to have a driver's license that meets the real ID standards so you can use that for boarding an airplane or having access to federal buildings. So I think that's the easiest way to classify that. So in some ways it does replace it, in other ways it does not. It comes down to what you're looking for. The other thing that I will mention that is going to be, well, what I should do is mention committees that I serve on. I serve on Veterans Affairs Committee. I serve on the Environmental and Natural Resources Committee. And I also serve on the Health and Human Services Finance Committee. In addition to that, I'm also on the Legislative Water Commission here in the state of Minnesota. That is a legislative body that takes a look at broader, very broad pictures on water issues. An example, we've just spent the last 10 months looking at wastewater, particularly from wastewater being generated by municipalities. What are the regulations involved with that? What do we need to do to meet clean water? How do we help small communities that may be in a process of dying, where they need to do something to their system, but if you've got a community that's shrinking, do they need an expensive system? Well, that's going to be for a community much larger, or you work with them in a way that if they're going to be shrinking is to downsize to the system that they will eventually need, which gets a little bit complex. So that means they may not meet some of the standards out there in that transition period. So it's trying to figure out how do we get from point A to point B without unfairly burdening a community that is not growing anymore. So those are examples of some of the issues, and that is a very interesting issue because it's we have small communities here in the metro area. We've got a lot of small communities out in the rural areas. It's trying to figure out how do we make that work. And it's been interesting as I've watched it. It's been a pretty bipartisan group as it's split. The commission is split evenly between the House and the Senate. There's 6 in the House and 6 in the Senate. And there's also 6 Democrats and 6 Republicans. So it's even Steven. That was done very purposely in the formation of the commission to try to keep some of the politics out of it. And for the past year, it's been very much focusing and spending time talking to the different organizations, from business to the environmental groups to businesses, about where their concerns are with regulations that the MPCA may have, the Department of Health, and then taking a look at how we address those. An example would be is one of the big things that came out of that is the chlorides in the water. Because people are trying to figure out how do we manage that in the future. And I know some of the local schools here have taken up that issue. Senator Weir and I have received several dozen emails from some of the students from the schools up in White Bear Lake who've been looking at the water quality and the salt chlorides getting in the waters, because once they're in, they're very, very expensive, almost impossible to remove from the waters. And one of the things that people see around here more often during this time of year is you start seeing the brine takes on the back of the snow plows. They find as they do that, it lessens the amount of salt that they have to put down, and they're being much more thoughtful about what they're doing with salt application. Because part of the problems is as the water runs off, it ends up not just in the surface waters, but it's also starting to end up in the underlying aquifers. Well, that's not come to a problem here. In some parts of the country it has. In Wisconsin, there's certain areas of Wisconsin right now where the salt content in the water that they're pumping out of the wells has reached a point where it's still safe to drink, but people can notice a salty taste in their water that they're pumping out. So, and that's one of the things that it's too expensive for them. You've got to go through a desalination process that is very high energy use, and it's very cost prohibitive in the current technology to be able to use on those bases. And the concern that people are having is not only are they starting to taste it, in some areas it's starting to rise to the point where it will start impacting aquatic life. And so that's the other concern that is out there, trying to figure out how do we do it. One of the big areas that the salt comes in from is from road salt application. The other area that adds just as much into it is water softening. Water softening is one of the biggest uses of salt entering into it. And in some areas you have to do that. The water's so hard you've got to do some water softening to make it drinkable and to be able to make it soft enough so that you can clean your clothes and use the soap, etc. The problem that comes in is that a lot of people are using water softening on their municipal systems. I'll use examples: St. Paul, Minneapolis, even White Bear Lake. I myself, I'm on the North St. Paul water system, which comes out of the aquifer. They're all softening it to the point that we don't use a water softener anymore, haven't for years, because the water is softened up coming out of the regular tap. And what it does is it helps remove that coming out, because a lot of communities in the wastewater system, this will circle back into the wastewater I was talking to before, is they're finding that the biggest fears that they have is they realize that right now the standards that have been established, we have a waiver from the federal government on right now, is the maximum amount of chlorides you're allowed to have in your waters that you're releasing. And most of the water treatment plants in the state have are next to impossible trying to meet those standards, because there are so many people that are using water softening processes in it. So the cities have tried to, cities went to trying to reduce the need for it elsewhere and keeping content as low as possible. That is still one of the biggest areas that the chlorides enter our water along those lines. So those are some of the things that we're dealing with. Some things that will be happening as we move forward is there's going to be some deadlines coming up in the House and in the Senate. And what the deadlines are for is making sure that bills to be eventually heard on the floor have to make it out of committees by certain deadlines. And so for a bill to make it to the eventually to the floor, be considered eligible for the floor, is it has to be out of the first, be heard and passed out of the first committee. And it can be either a first committee in the House or in the Senate. And that's got to be through the whole committee process by the 22nd of March, which is good. That's a little bit later than we had originally thought it was going to be. Then for the second half, and these are just policy bills now that are basically for policy. For policy bills, the second date that the bills will need to be through the other half. So if they came through the House, then they have to make it through the committee process in the Senate, or vice versa. If it first goes to the Senate, it have to be the House. They have to be, policy bills have to be all done by both committees by the 29th of March. And then the final committee deadline is April 20th, when anything dealing with any money bills would have to be out. And as I mentioned before, this is really not a bonding year, or actually not a budget year. However, there may be something that will come out with budget revisions based on the forecast that's going to be released tomorrow. And also if there's going to be anything on the tax bills that come up. The federal government made some changes. If we become compliant, and usually we take a look wanting to be matching up with the federal government. If we match up with the federal government, then we're raising taxes, the tax revenue coming in would raise substantially by about $400 million. If we don't go with federal compliancy and don't follow it, the collections would stay where they are, but it would meet a substantial amount of more paperwork because the deductions that the federal government did away with, we would have to create all those forms, and then you would now have to fill those forms out at the state level and turn them into your state taxes. And so it's going to be an interesting process to see what happens to that going forward. And that's one that we're kind of staying in tune to, and you're going to be watching for the bills that move out. They're just starting the initial hearings on the bills right now, and the final bill of that area probably we won't see until more toward the April 20th deadline. So those are some of the bigger things that we're going to be seeing coming out, et cetera. So that's kind of covered a little bit about what I've got. That covers, about the first 20 minutes here. What I want to do is kind of open up to questions that people may have going forward. I do want to be respectful of time to make sure that we wrap up by 8 so that I can get through and put back together so that the library can close on time. So we have until 8 o'clock. So at this point, are there any particular questions? Yes, Tim?
Can you explain to me what the purpose of legislation is? Is it to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the residents?
That is one of the purposes of legislation.
The reason I ask that is I just got a copy of my city newsletter, okay? And they're asking for individuals, I'll give this to you, to report illicit discharges, okay? They're saying it's an unlawful act to put anything directly into streams or lakes themselves. I've reported this multiple times. Nothing has happened. I think you're aware that 600,000 gallons of sewage is pollution. I talked to Lord Swanson's office. They're telling me statute 115, and we've talked about this on the phone a little bit. It deals with anybody that releases a hazardous substance and owns real property, which I own real property. My property was torrance deeded in the 20s, even before the DNR came into existence in the 30s. My deed supersedes anything, okay? So having real property, I have to be dealt with. I have a contract with the state of Minnesota on that property. It needs to be honored, and I'm holding you to honor that you'll deal with that. This letter from Lori Swanson's office says that if I want the legislation changed, that the government body to do that with is you and Mark Dayton, and Chuck Weger, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, all of which I've contacted. Lori Swanson has a file on her desk about that relating to that. As a hazardous substance, it has to be dealt with. It hasn't been dealt with. It's been swept underneath the carpet. Lori Swanson's office told me that there's a House Senate subcommittee on claims for claims that can't be litigated. Now, the way that I understand this, the Minnesota statute is in my favor, but yet it's against me because you can't sue an entity because they'll plead statutory immunity.
Excuse me, can you just, since I'm guessing most of us don't know what you're talking about, who's dumping?
It was 2 sewer spills on my property from the Met Council sewer line.
Okay. So it's a government entity that you're saying did something bad on your property?
Yes, and the government entity is appointed by Governor Dayton, the Met Council.
Okay.
So they're telling me that it can't be litigated because they'll plead sovereign immunity, but yet the Joint House Senate Subcommittee says that the claims cannot be litigated, but the House Senate Committee would look into that. Are you aware of that? How that operates?
No, when you ask how the committee operates, I don't know the ins and outs of how that committee operates. And I'll admit that right off the bat.
Can you look into that? Because I've asked, and I'll give you this too, because it says that you have to have a special form, and a settlement has to be made approved by the Attorney General. I think you got a serious issue if the law says one thing, but yet you can't hold them accountable unless you go to the subcommittee.
Okay, and what I'm doing is you're giving me, I'm emailing my assistant right now so that as we get done with this, I'll have him start giving me the information how that committee works. So I apologize. Typically I don't do stuff on the thing here, but this is important enough that I want to make sure
But see, now,
I get my LA.
what I'm talking about today, the last claim that was ever instituted by the House Senate Subcommittee was in 2016, so they don't get them very often. And the way that it was explained to me, it was an incident that happened in one of the prison facilities. So if you can look into that, I would appreciate the effort, especially since you said and talk about protecting the clean water. Those are all clean water violations, federal EPA violations. And as a homeowner, I have to disclose that, which makes my property value nothing. Edina Realty can't even give me a market analysis on my property because of the environmental disclosures that have to be filled out. But yet my property taxes are going up at the same time. I don't think it's fair. I think I'm getting the short end of the stick. And that letter there says to contact you and ask for your help, and that's what I'm doing. Especially since my property has a contract with the state of Minnesota going back to 1920s. Honor that commitment.
Sir, what did you want the representative to do? I mean, you want him to look into it, but what action do you want him to do?
Number one, I want to be compensated. I want to be able to have the right to sell my property if I choose so. I'm nearing retirement. A lot of people like to move out to warmer climate. They don't like to live in Minnesota. I just happen to have a piece of property that's been in the family for 4 generations.
Do you want this?
I kind of wanted my kids to take over the property. Right now, it's up in the air, and it's been up in the air for a couple of years now. It's a health, safety, and welfare issue.
It's terrible. I'm just thinking, who's going to? You want them to buy your property, or do you want them to clean up your property, or what do you want the representative to do?
First of all, I don't have a regular city lot. I have one of the biggest pieces of property left in Matamina. And I don't think it's fair that the government can just railroad you like this and you have no say in the matter. I've asked for additional testing. I've been denied. I asked for a certificate from the parties responsible, the Met Council, saying that I have no ill effects or health issues. What happened to my property? They won't sign a piece of paper saying that it's okay. And they can't because they didn't clean it up. Peter, if you take 600,000 gallons of sewer, if you put it in perspective, look at rail cars. Doesn't one rail car equal 1,000 gallons?
No, I think it's either 5,000 or 10,000 gallons that one rail car has, but you're still talking and I can't remember the exact number.
You're talking miles of rail cars here of raw sewage, and there's more than just sewage in sewage. It's not just pharmaceuticals. There's cleaning solvents, there's pharmaceuticals, you name it. The biggest consumer, one of the biggest consumers in Matamina is a school system. The public school uses more water than a home. How clean do you want your school? I think right now,
Yeah.
everybody wants them clean, they don't want the flu.
Is it still dumping? Or is that like a historic, is it like back a couple of years that this happened, or is it
It's
still?
back a
dumping?
couple of years. The first bill they said was 25,000 gallons. It turned out that it was 440,000 gallons. And when I told them that I owned that property, they pretty much didn't want to talk to me after that. So I've gone to everybody possible, all the way to Governor Dayton, and Governor Dayton won't return the phone calls. I've asked scheduling, I've asked constituent services to help me out. The only way I can get through is put star 67 on my phone and dial, or call from work and they'll pick it up on the second ring. And I don't think that's fair to any person, regardless of what the circumstances are. We're all supposed to be treated equal. I'm not getting the equal shake here. So I made copies for you. You know, I'd like you to look into that, especially that Legislative Claims Act, because I went to a deal in Stillwater on clean water for Governor Dayton, and I left my contact information with all the representatives that were there. Nobody wants to call me.
I did call you back, what was it?
Yeah, we spoke about a week ago Sunday,
Right.
but I'm talking, you know, people from the MPCA, the DNR, Governor's office. Governor Dayton won't touch this. He's the one responsible. He appointed those people to the Met Council. The Met Council needs to go bye-bye. They have too much power and authority for what they do. That whole department needs to go bye-bye.
Well, maybe they can give you some of that 3M money. That was $850 million. Maybe they can compensate you with special legislation from your representative.
The 3M money has been dedicated to the communities that are down in Woodbury, etc. They're not allowed to touch that money up in this area here. It's to address the plume that's down in the northeast metro area that has been put, that will go into a remediation fund that the MPCA has. When it goes into the MPCA fund, then those dollars are targeted specifically for that project down in that area. It's somewhat similar to the remediation fund that is used on the closed landfills that the MPCA has, as they collect a fee from everybody when we have trash that is dumped. There's a fee that is collected so that when landfills close, that they can manage the landfills when they're closed, or anything that may leak from them. So that's another example of where the funds are restricted as well. That money's coming in. The vast majority of the 3M money will be being used for developing a new water distribution system down there. They're talking about either contracting with St. Paul Water Utilities and bringing surface water in from the St. Paul Water Utility, or building a whole new water treatment plant on the Mississippi River down in that area for Cottage Grove and Woodbury and the communities in that area, and then redoing their water system to bring that water up. Those are a couple of the solutions that they're taking a look at right now.
Wasn't that money dedicated or entrusted to the DNR and the MPCA?
It was the update that we received on it. It was a negotiation that was done directly with the MPCA. Well, it was the Attorney General was doing it. The Attorney General did the negotiations. The money that was coming in was specifically designated in the MPCA remediation fund, specifically for addressing the water supply issues for the areas around Woodbury, Cottage Grove, and that part of the metropolitan area. Lake Elmo comes up into that. The furthest north it came is Lake Elmo and Oakdale, because they had remnants of documented the old dumps that had the PFCs in.
But it's hard because that money is funded by 3M, who people were saying adversely impacted those communities. So it makes sense that that money would be targeted toward the area that people said 3M harmed.
And the other thing is, this is, the money that's been put there is in addition to the responsibility that 3M is still taking care of for controlling the plume of contamination that's currently in the groundwater. There is ongoing, there was another settlement that was done a number of years ago where there was a series of wells that were put in the, and I can't remember the exact locations, it's in the southeast metro area, somewhere in the Woodbury, around the Woodbury, Oakdale area, so that as the contaminated pollutants are coming down in that area to preventing them from they're trying to keep it from spreading out from there. That water is pumped out and then taken, some of it is treated and reused, some of it just goes into the Mississippi River from the last documents of information I have. And that's a separate settlement by 3M, and they pay for that ongoing treatment, which is not too dissimilar than the site in Oakdale, where Highway 5, you know, Highway 5 is in Oakdale between Century and going out to Menards.
Yeah.
There's a big fenced-in area. That was one of the old landfills that 3M had used down there. They used to be owned by private people. 3M bought the private people out. And what they did is they put in a number, they dug out the old material that was there, and they put in a series of wells, and they've got a treatment facility there where they keep on pumping the water out, treating it and releasing it, and that may go on for years to come. And that's why when you drive past there, you see on the south side of the road that whole area fenced off. That's the old, that was the old landfill that was in the area that 3M had. And they were not the only ones. There were other companies that had dumped in there, but 3M stepped up to the plate so they would take the responsibility for cleaning it up. Yes, ma'am.
On a different, I know you said we had limited time. I was wondering if you foresee the state of Minnesota instituting any new gun control laws this session?
You know, that's a $24,000 question, or $64,000 question. I don't know. In the past chair of the Public Safety Committee would not hear any of the bills to allow him to go forward. He is no longer in the legislature. He was replaced this past year. We have a new chair of the committee. As of this point in time, he is not publicly committed to if he will hear bills, and if so, when. We've heard rumors in the last 24 hours that they might hear some bills between now and the end of the week. As of right now, we're not sure if that will happen or not. I do know that unless the committee can hear it, it gives it a hearing and gives it an opportunity to pass out, it's very difficult for us to bring it to the House floor without it being ruled out of order. There may be a process that can be used. And once again, the reason I say there may be a process, sometimes when bills are amended, and sometimes there's arcane rules out there that allow people, if you follow a number of steps, to maybe be able to bring a bill to the floor. And what they do is they put it on a register. But to bring it off the register on the House floor, you need 2/3 vote. So at this point in time, it'd be very hard to see a 2/3 vote to bring a bill off of the register on the House floor. It doesn't mean it could not happen, but in the current environment, I'm just not, and I'm hoping I'll be proved wrong as we go forward on it, but in the current environment, I don't see that occurring. There might be some sensible gun safety legislation that comes forward. I hear some concerns that there might be some agreement about, like, the bump stocks out there. There might be something more for a more elaborate thank you, background check. And there's another one that several conservative states have passed this, orders for protection, where if people are suspected that they might be a harm to themselves or others, or if there's an order for domestic protection, that in certain situations the police have the authority then to go in with that order to remove the guns, but then the guns have to be returned once it's determined to be safe and the order expires. And then people are able to receive and have their guns returned in that situation. So that is another thing that might. From there, I am not absolutely sure what may or may not pass out. There's a lot of there's been a lot of people coming into the Capitol expressing their opinions on it. And there's a lot of people who are concerned about that this might be a slippery slope, that they would lose any right to have guns out there.
Do you think that, obviously in the wake of Florida, but also in Minnesota, there was an incident at Osseo, which is, I'm a high schooler, and Osseo is actually very, very similar to Maumee. It's similar demographics, similar economic areas. So, do you think in the wake of that something actually possible? Obviously, the police and the law enforcement got there in time before serious harm was done, and things have not been released.
You know, you're asking some good questions. I do know.
Do you think there'll be movement on that?
I don't know. I know that the governor's looking at things right now, and with the next couple of days, we may something be proposed from the governor's side. One of the things is whatever is proposed, whether it's on common sense gun safety laws, or if it's on school safety, there is no one silver bullet that's going to solve the problem.
Yeah.
First of all, I want to be very clear on that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Peter, I've got another issue I'd like to do, and I'm glad to see you here today because I'm come down to see you in the Capitol tomorrow. Aaron Brock has asked me to come talk to all the people on the environmental today. And the bill that's going through the Senate, actually it's in House File 2097, prohibits placing a school within a quarter mile of a dump site and requiring annual notification if there are toxins that exceed residential levels. And this was established by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency and the Department of Health. So currently schools are considered industrial. So one of the schools in your district is Maumee, which has it's been listed on a national database being next to a toxic site. That being said, this is a bipartisan bill. I've been asked to see if you would co-author the bill going through there. You're on the Environmental Committee. You were the vice chair recently.
It's been 4 years.
Yes, and I actually warmed up Representative Dill toward the idea when he was the chair. So it is coming back through. It's had its first reading. And I would ask you at this time if you would commit. One of the things there in Brockford, it says you may live on top of or attend a school located on top of a Superfund site, being exposed to chemicals without your knowledge. This exposure may not show the disease process for 20 years, but nobody's coming back and monitoring you. Let's start working in a bipartisan fashion and start working together, find out what's happening in your community. We expect our children to clean up their bedroom. Think as we time expect ourselves to clean up our mess and begin to take a look at what we've done, what may be happening to the people. This bill that's written talks about awareness, early detection, and prevention. And this bill covers all three. So at this time, I'd like to ask you, would you co-author this bill going through the Senate floor to protect the children? It only affects those schools that are known to have toxins that exceed residential levels, which means you could not build a home on that site. But right now, they consider schools industrial. They have to be 10 times worse at before they do that. And so this bill only addresses toxic schools. And California is the worst violator in the country. Minnesota's number 2. 8 of them are in the Rice Creek watershed. So I would ask you, would you commit and tomorrow sign on to this bill as a co-author to prevent and protect the health, safety, and welfare of our children? Because I will tell you that I received a phone call 6 years ago. My grandson was told that he may be terminal. It's a call none of you want to get. And that's why I'm very passionate about it today. So had I known that he had a compromised immune deficiency, and I had knowledge that there are toxins there, I would make the decision not to allow him to go there. Or at least, if I had that knowledge, and what happens to the parents that have no knowledge of it, and 8-10 years ago, things start coming up, and they don't understand it. Now this requires annual notification. And really what it forces the schools to do, that if there are toxins that exceed residential levels that would prohibit you from putting a house, maybe it'll take the effort to clean them up. And so I would ask from you, would you commit tonight to co-author this bill. The House allows 20 signatures, and Representative Mariani's on there, Wagini is in there, who did the Parents' Right to Know bill. So I'm going to ask you, will you commit to that?
Are you saying Gene Venus is on that bill?
Yes. Linda Slocum, I mean, I could give the whole list that did the last time going
I
through.
will, and the reason I'm hesitating on that, because I know that I haven't seen this bill.
Yes, you have, it's the same one that came through before you.
And I was going to say is
Exactly
that
the
when it
same.
came through before, Gene Venus was opposing that bill.
No, she signed as a co-author. I've got a copy of
And that's
the,
why I'm asking, is because in committee last time around,
Yes.
she opposed the bill.
no,
And so-
she did not. Senator Representative Regina actually co-authored the bill, and she's offered to co-author it again. She did not go public with it. Actually, she wrote the bill, it's the Parents' Right to Know. She's very interested. Representative Slocum, Mariani, Murphy. It's a bipartisan bill. It's a great bipartisan bill. So I would ask you to commit to this. It's the same bill, and all the language has been written by the MPCA and the Department of Health. It only applies to those schools that are above residential levels. And that's why I'd ask, would you support the health, safety, and welfare of our children?
The devil comes down in the details, Larry, and that's where I'm going to tell you.
I'm going to give you this because I'm going to be bringing it to you tomorrow. The actual language for the bill. Here's the Senate. It's a bill. It's the same as the House. It was drafted by the MPCA and the Department of Health. And it's a very good, clean bill. I've been working on it for 6 years. You're very well aware of it. And the only reason I feel that you and Chuck Wiggers will not do it is because one of those schools are in your district.
Actually, there's more than one school. It goes back to what you're talking about. All the Montague high schools fall within a quarter mile of one dump
No.
that you're talking about. The high school does, and so does the middle school.
Not from where the toxin dumps were. Well, and that's okay. If it is
does.
within that quarter mile, they just simply will be notified. The parents and staff.
Also Wildwood.
Right.
That's
So-
It's a Wildwood school that we're talking about that was built within 250 foot of the landfill.
Right, but where the
With eight toxins that exceed residential levels.
That was built recently.
Huh?
That was built, the elementary school was built more recently, within the last.
It was built in
I remember
2012.
when it was-
Yeah.
Yeah, it was-
The landfill, yes, it's close to the landfill. The landfill encompassed, I think, a 30 or 40 acre site. The pit where the chemicals were dumped were in the northwest corner of the site. And the northwest corner of the site is one that is adjacent to the high school and the elementary school.
Actually,
Or not the
the
elementary,
left
high
site
school,
and the
middle
transfer
school.
site were within 300 feet of the.
Chemicals are right
Wow.
next to where I'm going to school.
The,
That's great.
well, the chemicals are there in terms that they were excavated out. They had to excavate the site and dig it down.
There's always traces.
There were 400,000 trucks that were dumped in the history of that deal. They took out 55. You think they got the right 55, Peter? I know the Bel Air Sanitation family was an unregulated dump site. Now the toxin had been determined by the Minnesota Pollution Control. Recently, Matamita allowed them to break the top and bottom seal of the dump. Prior to that, the MPCA only thought the dump was 15 foot deep. When they drilled through them, broke both the top and the bottom seal. Against the covenant, they determined that the dump was actually 30 feet deep.
You know.
That's why there's no hockey field going on top of there right now.
No, and in terms of, and we've got to be careful how we use words, because when you break the seal in the covenant part of it was determined by the MPCA. I've had some discussions with the MPCA because this issue has come up before in terms of the seal being broken, and they say they do allow the seal to be broken, but people are allowing to go in and take a look. They might want to use the site for something else. And so the
They talk
MPCA
about
did-
monitoring and testing.
But
That's
they-
the only thing. But what we were talking about is running water through there to establish.
Larry, you interrupted me. What I'm trying to do is relate to you what I had in direct conversations with the MPCA. I've had multiple conversations with them. Sometimes I don't always know if I trust what I'm seeing with them. So I asked from multiple sources, as I do checking different websites that are out there, etc. And from what I've heard from them, and then also talking to people who were involved in water issues elsewhere in the legislature, is there are certain times where you are allowed to go in with MPCA approval and oversight to go in and do extra testing and checking, because there are certain uses that when a site has been cleaned up to a certain point, you can use it for other purposes. Examples, it's very common that the ball fields, as a matter of fact, the ball fields at Montemead on top of it, that is a permissible use on it. You can do other things with other buildings if they are constructed in such a way with vapor barriers, etc., but it depends what is found underneath the soils. And I do know that the MPCA had concerns on the hockey proposal that was out there, and they sent a letter to the city of Montemead, or excuse me, not Montemead, City, to the school saying that they were finding some things out there that if they did want to put the building out there, that they would have to do vapor treating, remediation that would have to go in on top of it if they wanted to use that site. And that letter was done back in beginning of January, was when that letter was sent out to the school district, is where they would approve the building being put on the site for the hockey arena as long as there were certain conditions put on in terms of how they did for airflow management, et cetera, in that site.
So Peter, if I may, I do serve on the Grant City Council.
I understand.
I've watched many people, 90% of the people come and spoke against putting Wildwood Elementary on a dump site. Our council majority just rubber stamped it, gave it to them anyhow. And so I'm just going to ask you right now a simple yes or no. Will you co-author this bill? This bill is not specifically for Montemead. It's for the entire state to prohibit putting schools if there's known toxins that exceed residential levels. It's a fairly simple, so either I would like from you tonight a yes or no answer, not a maybe. Tonight, would you say you would commit to it, yes or no?
I will not give you a yes or no right now, because there is sometimes, when I've heard you present some of the things, the way I've understood it may not have always been accurate. Well, yeah, so sometimes there's misunderstanding. And so what I am saying is what I'd like to do is, you've said that a number of my colleagues have signed on to it. I want to talk to them first and find out why they didn't.
I will be down. I will be down there, and you will see the bill that was drafted last time and brought through there. Senator Wigini is down there. Carlos Mariani, I've talked to him, and he says, you know, Larry, it's a shame that a really good bill has to be brought back. He says he's got bills he's introduced 15 times over in his field, and he can't get them passed. This is a common sense to protect the health, safety, and welfare, so keep it in mind. It's a very good, well-written, researched, you can talk to Reviser Bob Elith, I'm very aware of it. It's all in that information that I give you right there. Written by the MPCA, Minnesota Department of Health, signed on. So if you're not willing to, I keep in mind, if you're not willing to support health, safety, and welfare of the children, it is going to be quite a campaign issue.
Well, I'm very concerned about making sure that we're properly protecting people. I also want to make sure that sometimes it feels like on some issues there are people who are trying to manipulate information that is out there in ways that are not entirely accurate to mislead people. And I want to make sure that's not happening.
I will provide you the phase 1 and the phase 2 study done by the MPCA. I'll provide you with the documentation that they said it was only 15-foot deep, but I'll provide you with Ron Entertech that said after the school broke the seal, they found the dump was 30 feet deep after and the only reason they broke the top and bottom of the seal was to determine how big a helical they're going to have to put in there to support a hockey arena on top of the mixed municipal dump site. The school district entered into a covenant so that they cannot put any buildings in there, and they're breaking their covenants when they broke the seal. The covenant is registered at the county, and that's how we found out. I mean, I can give you. I was nice to you. I bring you 3 pages here. I'll bring you documentation that far. I mean, and you know I've got the documentation.
I know you've got the document. I've seen some documentation online. I've also had the MPCA has also given me I've got a pile about that.
If you believe the MPCA, I work with them. I tell you what, if somebody comes to my door and say, hey, I'm here from the government, I'm here to help you, get the gun. That's where you need your gun rights.
Okay,
I'm just saying, I have no trust in the government or the MPCA. And because there's not one government agency that will hold another government agency accountable. I've learned it the hard way.
And what I'd like to say before we go on is, we've spent about 20 minutes on here. There were some people that came that might have other issues. And so I'd like to give them the opportunity to
Yep.
ask their questions that they might have. So,
I wanted to ask a question about healthcare. I know last year premiums kind of skyrocketed, and so there was a sort of a compromise made about, I don't know, it was subsidizing 25% of the premium or something
Right.
like that. What is happening this year?
There's nothing been proposed for the coming year. What happened is, last year, early in session, the Republicans have put a proposal out there to use money given directly to the insurance companies to subsidize insurance rates. We had asked initially to have it done in such a way that it was done 2 years ago. Remember how you saw people paid it and saw it right on the bills and had it taken off the bills. We were told at that time by the Republicans if we did it their way, that we would not jeopardize losing any kind of federal subsidies coming in. We believed them, and then we found out with the current administration that we were wrong. We lost millions, tens of millions of dollars in subsidies because to get the waiver to do that, they canceled other programs that they were subsidizing out there.
Like
So
Minnesota Care?
that's one of the areas, it's the working poor that lost the subsidy. So right now, we're having to eat that on the state dollar for the working poor to be able to still afford their insurance. So that's one of the problems that came in because we went that route, and once we've lost it, it's like lost for good. We've asked for reconsideration by the current administration, and it does not appear that is going to occur. So as a result, some of the things that we're looking at right now, because healthcare continues to be an issue out there, it's the biggest problem that I hear from the small businesses in the area. I've got a number of small businesses contact me because what is currently happening is the rates have gone up so high and the deductibles are so high that they feel like they have almost no coverage at all. In the small business market, small businesses are paying higher premiums than the individual market, and the deductibles are higher than they are in the individual market. And there's one business that shared with me, they have 10 employees. The employees are average age of 35 years old, which is some of the healthiest market. Their premiums for each individual is over $10,000 a year that the business pays, plus there's a small portion that the employer pays, or that the employee pays. On top of that, they have huge deductibles. So it's like they have almost no insurance at all. So one of the things that we're looking at is trying to find other ways to change the market. I can tell you that the nonprofit that I work for in this last go-around, as we were doing insurance coverage for our staff, we each year spend about 400 and 500 man-hours trying to evaluate an insurance policy that will cover our staff so that it's something they can afford and doesn't have deductibles that are high and out of sight. We have, as we went through, we had an insurance company that made a proposal to us. We accepted the proposal, enrolled our people. They confirmed it and said, yes, your group is good to go. And it was for a policy that was effective of January 1st. On January 2nd, we had our staff starting to say they'd not gotten their insurance card. So we reached out to the insurance company and said, well, the card's coming. Then on the 4th and 5th, we had something they had to go in for coverage. They went in for coverage, called the insurance company, and the insurance company said, no, there was no plan in effect at all. Now remember, we had a document from them on the 20th, in middle of December saying that we had a contract with them and it was good to go. On the 8th of January at 3:30 in the afternoon, we received notice from the insurance company that they were not covering our staff at all. There was no health insurance. This is what the individual market, this is what the market is. It's not, and I've heard from other small businesses, they've had similar frustrations. So at 3:30 in the afternoon, almost a third of the way through the month, we found out our employees indeed had no insurance coverage, and we were left scrambling to try to get it done. And the reason the insurance company rejected us, they said, well, when we started enrolling your people, letting them choose what they're going to have for your policy, you had one executive director. When you got to the end and had everybody on board, you had another executive director. Because you changed executive directors, we were declaring the contract null and void. That is the simple reason of why they did that. This is the simple reason why I'm very unhappy, and I can hear the frustrations of our small businesses out there of trying to deal with the health care insurance. And this has nothing to do with the Affordable Care Act or anything else. There's nothing on the Affordable Care Act that regulates this area that we're in right now. This is something that the insurance companies just get to do. It was extremely frustrating, and we went through a lot of angst before we were finally able to get coverage out there. And it's the first time I ever had to play the card, well, don't you know who I am? I am a state representative, and I find this unacceptable that you would do this to a company, say, partway through the month that you're no longer covered.
So that company did finally cover you? Or
They finally came out and said, well, we need to have, they gave us several options. One was, well, what we want is you need to find a CPA and a labor attorney to verify that your executive director is the executive director who signed it is your current executive director. They would not take that from our board of directors. They would not take that from myself or any of the other documents that we have. The other option was for the board to give approval to the ED to allow me to sign, because at that point in time, only the ED is allowed to sign contracts. So we had to jump through a bunch of hoops with the board to get that permission given so that I could go ahead and sign it, so that we could get our staff covered. And that is the state of the individual market out there. I felt it was pure harassment. And if the companies were really interested in trying to make the system go, a small business shouldn't have to jump through those kind of hoops to get coverage for their individuals.
Where do you stand on John Marty's bill for single-payer health care?
I'm very open to it. I know that there are a number of businesses, the White Bear Chamber, who are very supportive of it, who have contacted me asking for us to be supporting it. And the reason I'm saying I'm open to it is there's not any support really on the Republican side.
Yeah.
And because there's not any support, I'm hesitant to go into something only to have it undone several years later. I don't like this, we're jerking the market back and forth. I think that what I advised the people that I know who are small business owners who are active in the Republican Party is I said, please let your people know to come together and find something that we might be able to have some common ground on that. And where the small businesses are coming from, they spend so much time each year trying to figure out all the different plans that are out there for small businesses, comparing what does this one work, how does this one work. The problem that comes in is you find a plan that works for these people, but it doesn't work for this group over here, or vice versa. And they feel if we just have one plan that we could put our money into and not have to worry about going through this BS all the time, we'd be so happy. And that's where I hear a lot of support. That's why I have a lot of support for it. There might be some alternative ways that might be out there, some other things that I've batted back and forth with them, trying to find some other common ground. And this is more been with the business community, is maybe something that's a version of Medicare, where you pay and you have X amount of coverage from the plan that is out there, and you might get a supplemental plan to cover extras that go on top of it. That might be something. Another one that might be available out there is, you mentioned about Minnesota Care earlier. There is a proposal to allow individuals to enroll into that. And one of the things that I've got right now is I'm working on a bill to find out if we can do the same thing for small businesses, allow them to enroll into it. The problem is they're not set up to handle groups. They're set up to handle individuals. The people I've talked to so far have said we could allow the individuals to enroll and the businesses could pay. The problem that comes in is when the businesses pay, they have to pay, give the money to the individual, and then the individual has to pay the taxes on top of it. The big problem that comes in is if you've got people who are unbanked, and there's a certain population that's unbanked. Some of the common examples I've run into, people that experience where people have done credit card fraud in their name. Somebody creates some other personality using their social security numbers, etc. What happens is you get liens that are placed out there, and they go right against the bank accounts. And so if you've got a bank account and you've got your paycheck going into it for automatic deposit, it doesn't work because who's ever got the lien takes all your money and you've got nothing left. That's usually on IRS claims, and that's usually where the big problem comes in, is because the damage that's been done extends up into the government level, and it's a long process to get out. And so those kind of instances, it does not work. And I know people have fallen into that trap. So what we're looking at is trying to find a way that people would still be able to do it by payroll deductions and have the business then just submit all the money to the group. The only one that they found right now is a process called PEEPS. It's the plan that a number of small school districts use and are able to enroll into. So the other thing that we're researching right now is a possible that we could expand that out so small businesses could take advantage of it. The deductibles they have are much lower than what is available in the individual market, and the overall rates that are being charged are much lower. So that is another option that we're looking at trying to do in that area, and that is something that is going to take a lot of effort because it's not just easy to do these type of things. I'm looking for some support as I'm talking to some businesses and people that they might know on the Republican side that we could do some joint things so that we could maybe get that opened as an option. Because when we've got buy-in from both sides, we've got a higher likelihood of something like that continuing. And so that's why when you ask about universal health care, I'm kind of hesitant because I don't see that buy-in right now. I'm very open to it, but I want to make sure we put a process in there that's going to work and be sustainable going forward.
So I'm a little confused. Do you specifically support and would vote for a measure to let individuals buy into the government option?
Into account, I would, yeah, that would be the allowing into the Minnesota.
Yeah, and you
there's
would
a bill
support
on
that,
that. There's a bill on that. If I remember right, that is a bill that is assigned to the Health and Human Services Committee,
Okay.
and we're waiting to see if it'll get a hearing on. So that is a bill that, yes, I'd be open to supporting. I've been following that one very closely,
And as it stands, you would vote for it?
yeah, that one I would vote for. And I'm noticing right now, to be respectful of time, I'm seeing that we're at 5 after 8. I've got to start getting things cleaned up on the chairs and everything here so I can get it put away in time. So I want to thank everybody for coming tonight and appreciate the opportunity to be able to interact with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
On Modern United, Wildwood Elementary is there levies? What is it?
Right now, I didn't know you were an environmentalist. I didn't